What's up, gamers? It's your boy Eric, aka at the Beef Dev, back at it again with another YouTube video after a really short hiatus of about 3 years since my last art video. Anyway, today, as I'm sure you read from the title of this video, it's all about sculpting seamless textures for games. In specific, it's kind of like rock with a whole bunch of like grout over it. This isn't really a tutorial per se, but more of an insight as to what the actual process entails. And I will be talking to some of it, but it's not gonna be like step by step, use this brush or do this thing with this layer. Right. So first things first is what I like to do is just change my settings, like especially the quick save settings. Move it to skip history, so when it auto saves, it makes ZBrush be a little faster and be better at performance. And when it auto saves, it's way faster. After that, I just set up a whole bunch of spheres. And I think in total I ended up setting something like 12 spheres and started like slowly shaping them with the move tool, with the move tool to try and get them to like an oblong type of shape. Generally when I'm sculpting like stone or brick or anything like that, I like to make 4 to 5, let's say it's bricks, master bricks. So each side of the brick has a very distinct silhouette and details within it. That way I can spin it around and change it by skewing it a little bit. So it makes it way easier to, I guess, populate your texture map, and it makes it a lot less obvious for the user that you're really only using 4 to 5 different rocks. Here you can see me struggling with the curve tool, and I was just going back and forth trying to cut it to make it flat, and it wasn't working. And the main reason that was happening is because I totally forgot to delete all the levels of subdivision. So it doesn't let you really do complex operation while you have levels of subdivision. So you gotta either freeze them or delete them. In my case, I ended up deleting them. At some points here, you see like the screen is not really doing anything because I'm going back to look at my reference to make sure that I'm still doing what I think I'm doing. It's very important to always keep your reference in mind. So, look at your reference, kids. Okay, so at this point, I'm just making sure they're all flat, and I'm gonna start moving them and kind of scaling them so they can be on the sides of the initial plane that I added. Okay, so yeah, here you can see me doing a little bit of test to try and see if I can layer the same rocks and cut out things that I don't need so that it gives it more depth and more texture. But as you're about to see, it doesn't always work out. A lot of this process is just experimenting, trying things out, and then deciding whether or not you're gonna stick with it. In this case, I didn't really stick with it. So I just started moving the rocks up to the skew like how I said earlier. If you want like a really detailed tutorial on how to do this, I really recommend flip normals. So you just go to YouTube, search flip normals and tillable textures, and they have a whole bunch of those. It's actually how I learned how to do it. I mean, I had a general idea from school, but I had never actually tried it till I saw a tutorial, and then I just began doing it. Alright, so once all these stones are nice and aligned, I start using a height map from a project I've made like a while ago, and just start clicking and dragging to add this sort of like detail. It's one of those things where, like, again, it's just a lot of experimentation, And here I'm just clicking, dragging, trying alternative modes, trying different shapes. For all this, it's very important to have generally high poly geo, because otherwise you're gonna get this really crispy, blurry, but not in a good way, kind of shape that kind of looks like what you're trying to do, but it's very easy to get mistaken. Overall, I ended up not liking this experiment, so I just undid everything and then tried again with another height map that I had used. So usually with these height maps, they're black and white. So what I like to do is I plug them into the alpha channel of a selected brush, and then switch the actual dragging to paint to the dragging rectangle. Makes it a lot easier to control what you're seeing. And here, I usually play around with like the intensity and the focus shift and things of the sort. You don't really have to for some things. Some things it just works out, but overall I'd recommend messing with those settings. Here, I just started moving all these rocks like by 200% on the x-axis at first to make sure that they're the exact same rock, and where it gets cut off on the plane, it's going to be repeated on the other side, thus making it tiling. And you're going to be needing to do this for like all the edges. So if you do, let's say, the left side, then you got to offset all the, I guess, rocks or components to the right side, and you got to do the exact same thing. If you do the top side, you got to mirror it to the bottom side. So this is the most tedious part, I'd say, of this whole process, because it's just populating I guess the whole square and making sure things are skewed properly. It can be fun if you have some dope jams and you're just making sure to skew the rocks a little bit, to spin them and things like that. So like I said earlier, it's about 12 rocks, and the reason why I'm doing all those, like, I guess, rotating, moving up and down a little bit, skewing, scaling, so it makes it, like I said earlier, harder for the user to figure out that all of this is just the same 4 or 5 rocks, in my case 12 rocks, which helps a little bit. And all that being said, you'll notice that I used a couple rocks a lot more than some other ones. That's because they look more like what I think in my brain as generic rock, right? So an example why that's important is, let's say I had made a cool skull shaped rock and I put it like somewhere in the top left. So once you have these textures map all going on, the user is gonna easily be able to identify that like unique rock, and they're gonna be able to figure out where the seams of the textures are. Because as much as one tries to hide seams, it's inevitable to make something truly seamless, and the users will see it if they play the game long enough. once I'm done setting up all the rocks, populating and making sure it's like symmetrical, top, down, right, left, as far as like the edges go, I add a cube and then just using some noise and some other pre-built alphas to make it look more like how grout would look like. Because I don't know if you, well, I mean, you probably have to pay attention if you're looking at this video, right? But it's just grout and a lot of other things. They're not like smooth, right? They have different peaks and valleys that seem random, and most of the part they are random in real life. Well, you can't quite do that in like games, so you have to emulate the randomness. So after having done that, and I started moving it with the move tool up and down just to have different levels of like how grout is as per my reference. And then I just decided to resize the whole canvas because I was happy with the way things looked. I resized it to 2K, zoomed out, and then started switching to different materials to get my different texture maps, right? So the first one is the normal, and like just switch to a normal material and then just do like convert to texture and then export to get your normal. Then I think it's sketch 04, that's how I get my curvature, and in shade 4, that's how I get my normals. But I make sure to always switch it to best rendering so you can get the best possible shadows for all this. And as you can see, it takes a hot second. Like I sped up this whole footage, and even then it takes a hot second and a decent rig for the best rendering to come out, because it's like calculating every single shadow, every single overlap. Cool. So after all that, I go to Substance Painter, I import a plane, and then I import all my texture maps. That's why you see my mouse is kind of wiggling around in the emptiness, because I'm only capturing the actual Substance Painter, not all the subsequent menus. Here I just end up throwing in one of the smart materials that I've made, and making smart materials is not terribly hard. It's just a matter of like finding something you like, which generally involves using like edgeware and other generators, at least for me. And I'm just messing around with the values, trying to add different hues, different intensities, because in my reference, not all these rocks are the same color, even if they've been out for who knows how long out in like the elements. Some of them are a little bit darker, some of them are a little bit lighter. And for this particular project, I'm trying to focus on a stylized feel. So you're gonna see like deeper colors that you would normally, and you're gonna see lighter highlights that you would normally. In fact, most of these highlights in real life, they're not all that visible, and they're very few and far between. But here I'm just pumping everything up so that it achieves that stylized Fortnite-like look. After that, I start messing around with different things. Like this whole process is just a whole bunch of trial and error, see what you like, see what you don't like, and maybe you gotta find that balance of putting, I don't know, say 5-10 minutes trying something out, and if it doesn't work out, scrap it and do the next thing. So here I'm pretty sure I'm just messing with some of that, trying to add dirt, trying to see how I can make this more believable within the context of this stylized world. And overall, like making different textures, so I can I think it's called vertex painting, where you get like, let's say it's this base stone and then you have this dirty stone, and then you can blend in between in Unreal. I'm pretty sure you can do it in Unity too, but I've only really done it in Unreal. So I'm trying to make like the base stone. I think I'm also gonna end up making stone that has some sort of like moss, and some stone that has some sort of dirt. And while I'm trying all these things, I'm also switching between the blending modes to go base, color, light. It's pretty much like Photoshop if you're familiar with those things, where you know there's light and color burn and all those really fun tools that help you achieve different looks. Something to keep in mind when you're working on your textures, be it in Substance or Photoshop or whatever, is that the lighting setup that comes pre-built in to I guess render out is gonna be always a little bit different than what your scene is. So make sure to, I guess, have the file open, have good naming conventions, make sure things are nice and proper so you can go back and mess with them, because more often than not you're gonna be finding yourself doing that until you get the groove of your current lighting for your current project. So for me, the lighting that's on Substance is wildly different than Marmoset. That's what I'm using to like show off the texture. and that's also a bit different than the Unreal lighting that I'm using. So again, it's just trying to find a balance, and there's always going to be tweaks, and there's always going to be variants. So yeah, it's a really good thing to keep in mind. So once I finished doing all these textures, I set them up in Marmoset like I said, and I set them back to back so you can see where they tile. And you have like the base stone, the mossy stone, and then the dirty stone. So that's basically the whole process for making these things. If you have any questions, be sure to let me know. and I'll try to answer to the best of my abilities.